Tara, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of Jennifer Cochran, I would like to welcome everyone, and I hope that everyone is doing okay this morning. The work that we're all doing to respond to need throughout our region continues and is more important than ever at this point, at this time. I'd like to thank you for all that you're doing for our community. With that said, I'd love to introduce first Brandon Elledge, who is our the chairman of our Community Investment Fund grant process. Just so everyone knows, prior to Brandon speaking for a few moments, today's session will launch the Community Foundation's largest discretionary grant cycles, which will include the Community Investment Fund grant process, which I know many of you have applied for in the past, as well as the Ross Roberts Fund for the Arts and the Environment Fund. So before we continue on and give you all the information about all of the grant cycles at this time, I'd like to introduce Brandon Elledge and have him say a few words. Brandon.
Thanks very much, Sari. I want to, on behalf of the foundation, I want to welcome all of you today and appreciate your time and your interest in our grant cycle here as we're launching our CIF grant funding for this year. To echo Sari's comments, I want to just do a very heartfelt thanks to each of you, all the nonprofits on this line today, for what you do, all of your good deeds and what you're doing for our region. Particularly during this COVID time, as we're still coming to grips with this pandemic, trying our best to sort through it and get through it. Thank you for everything that you do for our community. We'll be funding a number of different focus areas again this year through our CIF fund, which includes poverty relief, child and youth development, a particular Le Monde fund funding child and youth interests along the Route 1 corridor, education, military personnel and their families, aging, and mental health. And as Sari just noted, we'll also be going over our arts fund and environment fund grants as well. So for the newcomers on the line today, welcome. We're very appreciative that you're here and your interest in our CIF fund. And for those prior grantees and prior applicants on the line today, we're glad you're back with us. And thank you for joining our webinar. And thanks to Sari and the staff here who have put the webinar together and the other folks that have helped put the webinar together. So with that, Sari, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. We're having some technical difficulties. One moment, please, as I move forward the slides. Great. Thank you, Brandon, for your introduction. And we're so glad. We're very fortunate, by the way. Brandon's on our board of directors, and we're so fortunate to have Brandon and others so involved in a lot of what the foundation does, but especially around our grant making, as our board continues to just be aware of what the needs are in our region. So thank you for being involved and for your continued leadership, Brandon. So for most of you, and as Brandon mentioned, we welcome all of the new nonprofits or leaders that are on this call. Most of you are familiar with us, but just a quick overview. And again, our website, cfnova.org, has information about our foundation in general, our grant making priorities, and just information about who we are and what our leadership is in the community. But basically, we are a 501c3 public charity. A lot of people don't know that, but we are a nonprofit, just like all of you. We have donor advised funds that donors make decisions about where they want their funding to go and invest in causes that they care about. We also meet critical community needs through all these grant cycles and others. Again, on our website, there are other opportunities listed as well. We are a geographically focused grant maker, Northern Virginia, and we'll be going into that a little bit more in a few moments. And we also have become experts on local needs and resources just because of our grant making and our civic leadership engagement as well. So we were founded in 1978. At this point, we've grown tremendously since our founding. We manage at this point over $70 million in total assets. And we, as I mentioned, have many funds, over 200. And in 2020, we awarded more than $13 million in grants and scholarships. It was our largest year to date. And we also, as many of you know, when you applied for funding through the COVID-19 Response Fund or for Build Back, Dream Forward from that fund as well, We've given out over $2 million in grants from that process. That took many months, as all of you know, and to over 120 organizations. So many of you may have received funding during those processes, but please know that you are eligible to apply, of course, for funding as we move forward into these other grant processes as well. Our mission, for those of you who are not familiar, is to grow philanthropy to respond to need, see innovation, and lead and convene our community. And we do that through grant making, we do that through our events and through our engagement in the community. Our service area, and as I mentioned earlier, geographically, we serve Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun, and Prince William counties, and then the cities of Alexandria, Fairfax, Falls Church, Manassas, and Manassas Park. One of the key values of having these webinars to educate you about our ongoing grant processes is to also update you on some of the things that we are doing here at the foundation to improve our work and improve our grant making. And one of those, the aspects and components of the foundation that we've just launched is our new Center for Research called Insight Region. And I am so pleased to introduce to all of you Elizabeth Hughes, who is our Senior Director of the Research Center, who will tell you a little bit about her work and how it's going to be impacting the general community, the foundation, but also our work as grant makers. So Elizabeth.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks Sari for the introduction. I'm the Senior Director of Insight Region, which was launched a little less than a year ago to be a growing hub for data and analysis on issues that are critical to Northern Virginia. So I see this resource as both an externally facing one, so the development of data and research that we can share with the nonprofit community, with donors, with business and government, and with the general public to help them understand and take action on those critical issues. We're also going to be using it as an internal resource, so helping to identify issues that are critical in grant making, in our civic engagement and community leadership to better inform our processes. So for the 2021 grant cycle, we've added a few questions on data to better understand some of the organizations that are serving the community. In 2021, Insight Region will have a specific focus on shared prosperity. So thinking about how we can use data and research to improve self-sufficiency, both for the communities that we're currently serving and also that next generation of children. So I'm really excited to be on this call and to see some of your questions. And thank you, Sari, for the introduction.
Great, thank you very much, Elizabeth. And as Elizabeth mentioned, in the Community Investment Fund application, there's a new section for data, and we're really looking forward to having that information to help us become better at what we're doing and also continue to inform us about what the needs are in the community. So thank you. So this spring, we normally run the Community Investment Fund grant process, as we've all mentioned, but we also made a decision to run the Environment Fund and the Ross Roberts Fund for the Arts at the same time, just to streamline all of our our core grant processes, honestly, at a calendar time. So we will be doing the Community Investment Fund again, and we'll have the focus areas that Brandon mentioned actually and are listed right there. The Environment Fund will also be run at this time, and the Ross Roberts. Each of those areas will have its own review committee to make decisions, and we are very excited to have issue area experts and leaders as usual, and I'll be talking about that in a few moments. But aside from our grant making, what other opportunities to engage with us, and many of you may have done this already, but we have our first Tuesday sessions, which offer nonprofits an opportunity to come talk with us on a one-on-one basis. It's a 45-minute brainstorming session. And we see ourselves, as all of you know, there are limited dollars for grant making. And so we see ourselves wanting to reach out to all of you and offer hopefully some assistance in helping you build your organization. So First Tuesdays is one of our ways in which we do that. We also welcome you to join us at our events. And we are hosting, Elizabeth just introduced herself. So next week we are launching the Insight Region Housing Brief. There's going to be an event with that on January 13th. We welcome you to join us. The information's on our website. We'll also be following up from this webinar with a link to that event as well. And we hope that you can join us, and also that all of you will take advantage of reading the brief that will be presented after the event to just let you know a little bit more about the direction that we're going, but also just having an understanding of where Insight Region is going and what types of resources and data that we'll be putting out into the community. So we're also going to be having our annual Shape of the Region event. It's happening on March 11th. We're doing an afternoon event this time. Please mark your calendar, save the date, March 11th from 12:30 till 2:30. And again, Shape of the Region has become an annual event where the entire region comes out. Very exciting. The topic or the theme for this year is co-creating a new Northern Virginia, an emerging vision of a more inclusive, sustainable, and equitable region. So we hope you'll join us for that as well. So going back now to grant making and why all of you are here, I want to give a quick review of what happened in 2020 and what is going to be happening in 2021. So 2020, the Community Investment Fund, we had 127 applications that were submitted. We gave out 32 grants, a total of $422,160. And we have 150 volunteers that served on 6 grant review committees. And I want to quickly speak about the grant review committees for a moment. We are very fortunate in that every year our group of reviewers has increased, and there's a lot of interest in helping us make these decisions. So the CIF has grown, that committee has grown, and we've also now added new committees, one for the Ross Roberts Fund for the Arts. So last year, we ran up for the first time a competitive grant cycle. There were 29 applications that were submitted. We gave out $60,000 to 3 nonprofits, and we had 6 volunteers that did that review. We also, up until this point, have not had a competitive grant cycle for the environment. So this will be the first year that we engage a committee also in the same way that we've done for CIF and for the Ross Roberts Fund for the Arts. And we are looking forward to running a thorough process, and we're very much looking forward to learning more, more about the arts community and also the organizations that serve, that provide services and resources in the environment space as well. This is an opportunity for us to learn as well about the needs in the community and which nonprofits are doing some great work in our region. So we're looking forward to these 2 new grant processes becoming more robust and as robust actually as the Community Investment Fund. The 2021 criteria for all 3 grant cycles is the same, and that is applicants, of course, must be 501c3 organizations and providing charitable or educational services. Local, state, and federal government entities are not eligible to apply. Grant requests can be for general program support. And just so everyone knows, really, we are very interested in providing you with unrestricted, flexible funding. That is the key phrase here. We understand that you have needs right now because of COVID and just this challenges that we're all experiencing, and that we really see ourselves as a flexible funder and hope that we are helping you build your organization and your capacity. So applications for capital improvements, endowments, or scholarship awards will not be considered and historically have not been considered. And grants will be made to organizations providing services in all the areas that I mentioned earlier. One application per applicant. And in this year's situation where there's Community Investment Fund and then Environment and Arts, we are asking actually only for one application. Decide where you would like, where you think you would have the best fit, and please make that decision and submit an application in that area. And then late and incomplete applications will not be considered. So quickly, I'd like to go over the areas, the specific criteria around each of the areas. Again, all of this is on our website, cfnova.org. So, and also this webinar will be recorded, so you can listen to it as well, but just know this information is available on the website. Again, the Child and Youth Development Fund, which has been around for a really long time, again, supports positive youth development organizations or programs that support and provide opportunities to children and youth ages birth to 21 who may be at risk due to poverty, defined as up to 200% of the federal poverty level. And the focus of this area is after school and summer activities and academic achievement. For funding this year, we will be giving multiple $10,000 grants, and as usual. And so if your program fits into this area, please feel free to apply. We know that there are going to be limitations around school-related programs. So we will be taking that into account with COVID, but if your organization does fit into the space, please apply. Our education fund has 3 focus areas: so early childhood, English language proficiency for adults and children, and then workforce development. Again, the grant amounts are $10,000 each, and there'll be multiple grants. This is actually a very exciting moment for me, because not only are we going to be funding aging in place grants, as we have done in the past, but we will be doing also providing a mental health grant, 2 mental health grants, actually. And that for us is a very exciting moment. This is a dream of ours. We were able to do some mental health funding during the COVID time period. However, this is allowing us now to have a grant during CIF, and we are looking forward to supporting organizations that really are providing a need that we know is so important. And we would love to ideally increase funding in this area. Our Poverty Relief Fund, of course, is again focused around housing, shelter, eviction and foreclosure assistance, and non-related emergency assistance. Again, we were so fortunate during our COVID funding to be able to support many food organizations. During CIF, we will not be funding food organizations, however, but we'll be funding in those areas that I mentioned, and there'll be $10,000 grants again and multiple grants. And then our military personnel and their families fund, once again, we'll be making 2 grants of $17,500 each. And our Monde fund, which Brandon mentioned earlier, thank you, it's focused around the Route 1 corridor, and in those focus areas around child and youth development, and there'll be 4 grants of $20,000 each. And if I can quickly mention, one of the, as I've mentioned in the past, our dream is really to have endowments in all of these focus areas, but that we are fortunate that some of them, including the military personnel and their families and the Aging in Place Fund, have endowments associated with them. So at this point, this is what we were able to do, but we're hoping to grow all of these areas from a funding perspective. And so here we are, and we are introducing 2 new areas during this time period, as we've mentioned, both the Environment and the Arts Fund. The Environment Fund is an endowed fund, and we're very excited about it. It's a new fund that we just launched, of course, in 2018. And the focus of the Environment Fund will be basically this year will be conservation, energy efficiency, and sustainability. And as I mentioned earlier, we have not run a competitive grant process yet. This is our first one, and we'll be giving out 1 grant amount of $26,000. And we are asking that whoever applies, that they collaborate or will collaborate with a government entity, local, city, or county, or regional, and offer an education program in one of the areas that I mentioned. And then the Ross Roberts Fund for the Arts, again, was established in 2018, and the role of Ross Roberts is to celebrate, promote, and support the arts in Northern Virginia. The focus will be around performing arts and visual arts, and the grant amount is $20,000, 3 grants of $20,000 each. And again, both Environment and Ross Roberts will be an opportunity for us to really continue to learn more about your communities so that we can become better grant makers and educate the community about what the needs are. So we're very excited about these 2 new opportunities at this time. So quickly, a quick overview, and many of you may be very familiar with this, but our process looks as follows. We accept all of our applications. We're looking forward to receiving many applications on February 4th. We'll be doing an initial staff screening, which will involve reviewing to confirm that you're all 501c3 organizations and that we have all the materials that need to be submitted. There will be a committee review. As I've mentioned in this conversation, we are very fortunate that we have issue area experts, community leaders, and donors that help us make these decisions. We believe that it is a fair and unbiased and informed process, and we are always striving for that. All of our committee members complete conflicts of interest to make sure that there is no conflict with any of the organizations that they review. There's an online review tool, which you all will be familiar with because you're going to be applying into the Founded system, and then we then assign applications through that system to all the reviewers. And then there'll be a final committee meeting that after all the reviews are made, there will be suggestions about which organizations move forward to the final committee meeting, and decisions will be made at that point. One of the key items of our process is that we ask all of our volunteer committee members to include feedback as to but aspects of the application, how questions that they had, things that could be improved, and then we give the feedback back to you as the organization. So whether you're funded, and then we provide you site visits, they will be virtual site visits. This year to all of you, we would give you that feedback. And then if you're not funded, we also spend time, Jennifer and I will spend time with you and give you the feedback from the reviewers. So we really hope, again, although we cannot fund everyone, we really hope that we can add value to all the work that you're doing by at least providing you feedback to help you become better as you apply for funding or look for other grants in the future. So what we look for is, of course, fitting with our funding priorities. I also tell organizations all the time that for many of these reviewers, they are not very familiar about with your organization or the program that you're running. And so I ask you to please work on having succinct, clear descriptions of your organization and or the program that you're applying for. Also, any data that you can have that can demonstrate the value of your program or why your program exists is helpful, as well as explaining why the funding is needed, of course, for your organization or program. And then also there is a results section. We definitely want to hear from you and hear what are you trying to achieve and how do you plan to measure your results and achieve the results that you're outlining. Also, a clear description of how the funds will be used. So again, succinctness is actually very important here. There's a section that actually asks you for a 1 to 2 sentence description. And if you can explain to us how the funds will be used, that's very helpful to us. We love to see collaborations and partnerships with other nonprofits. And also we love to see strong financials, of course, and strong boards of directors. So all of those documents are reviewed by our reviewers, and we look for strong organizations that we can invest in. So now I'd love to pass on the baton to my colleague, Jennifer Cochran, who will review the online system a bit and go through the application. Jennifer.
Thank you, Sari. So as Sari mentioned, for our grant application process, many of you know this already, we use a system called Founded. So you'll see the link here. All applicants apply at this link. I don't want you to panic and think you have to write down this URL because it's available on our website, cfnova.org as well. One note, if you have applied for a grant in the past, you do not need to create a new organization profile. But if you're new, you'll need to create a new organization profile. And we just ask that if you have any difficulty with logging in or passwords or any confusion, contact us and we'll be happy to help you get that sorted out. Founded does require that you use Google Chrome as your browser. So just make a little note of that. If you're filling out an application, it's best to use Google Chrome. And the apply link with all the applications will be live on our website by 5 p.m. today. So be aware of that. And then there's a link here for tutorials that you can access at any time if you need assistance. Sari, can you advance the slide? Thank you. So with the 2021 application, you'll see here that these are some of the segment areas. What I'm going to be talking about right now is the application for our CIF process. But those of you that are on this call that are planning to apply for either arts or environment, know that your application is similar to this. And you'll see that when you log in to apply later on. The application areas, as mentioned on the slide, are the organization narrative. There's a section for information about whether you're applying for general support or program support. There is an area there where we request a 1 to 2 sentence summary. I think Sari touched on this a little bit earlier, asking if you could be clear and concise as possible there, because we may use that in some of our future communications. There's a section on if you're submitting for general support or program support. And if you don't plan to submit for general support, then you just simply move on to the program support and the program narrative section. There is a section that requests supporting documentation. And so you'll be able to upload those files there. And as Elizabeth talked about earlier in our presentation, there is a new section in the CIF application this year, and it's a data section. And the information in that section of the application will help inform our Insight Region initiative. Then you submit the application and your process is complete. As Sari did mention earlier, we do not accept applications that are incomplete or late. So we'll take a look at the timeline and the overall schedule on the next slide. So today by 5 o'clock, all of the applications will be open. As I mentioned, they'll be available via clickable links on cfnova.org, or if you have logged into the grant application system in the past, you can use that link and log in. All applications are due by 5 p.m. on February 4th. Then our grants committee will evaluate all the applications in a process that runs February through March. And in April, we will award and announce the grants and make payments. And then in 2022, the final grant reports will be due from any grant recipients.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. And again, all of this, these are our contact, of course, emails, and feel free to reach out to us. And I think that there may be some questions as well at this point.
All right, thanks everyone. I am now going to submit some of the questions that have been submitted through the Q&A for a discussion here. So as I go through this, feel free to add to these, but again, just to review with everyone, you will be receiving a copy of the slides and a recording of this presentation. So there were a few questions about that. If a slide went by too quickly, you'll get to review it, and all the information is available on our website as well. So let me begin, and I'm just going to try to kind of go in order here. The first question is about whether our grants that we're discussing today apply to individuals or if they're simply for nonprofits. So maybe if you could just address that. It's a specific question about someone who's looking for money for college.
So we have a very robust scholarship program, actually, and I encourage you to look at our website at our list of scholarships. I'm happy also, Jennifer, or I'm happy to circle back with you and tell you more about our scholarship program that we have. All of these grants are only for 501c3 organizations.
Thank you. Okay, so there have been a couple of questions submitted here about whether an organization can apply to one of the funding cycles we discussed today in addition to COVID funding.
So at this point, we are not launching any type of COVID application process. So at this point, CIF and the environment and the arts are the focus. If there is additional funding around the COVID fund, we will be in touch with you, and you will be eligible to apply for that as well. If there was a competitive grant cycle, exactly.
Thank you. Okay, so there were a couple of questions about clarification around our service area. So if you could, again, remind about our service area, and then if a nonprofit is headquartered in Northern Virginia, but the beneficiaries are served across our region and other locations, would that organization be eligible?
So our service area, as I mentioned, is Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun, and Prince William counties, and in the cities of Alexandria, Fairfax, Falls Church, Manassas, and Manassas Park. An organization, as long as you are serving residents of Northern Virginia, you are eligible to apply.
Great. Okay. Going through the list here, there is a question to you, Elizabeth, that is just about how your work in Insight Region interacts with the Opportunity Index, which we've shared in past years as a resource for our data.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Our hope is that as we build out Insight Region and focus more squarely on issues around self-sufficiency and economic opportunity, that that work will inform the types of metrics that are tracked in the Opportunity Index. So in addition to tracking the demographic information and other elements currently in there, we're hoping to have more robust measures around self-sufficiency, such as housing affordability and also economic opportunity. And that's coming in 2021.
Thank you. Okay. Some questions here specific to some of the areas of funding. So this is one about the Arts Fund, wanting to know about whether a larger or smaller organizations have any if smaller organizations or larger organizations are considered differently, and what is expected from that funding pool.
So at this point, we are really just interested in funding arts organizations. So I would welcome small or large organizations to apply. I think as long as you're an arts organization in Northern Virginia, I would welcome you to apply, and we look forward to reading your application.
Great. And to follow on that question, does the Ross Roberts Fund for the Arts support general operating in addition to capacity building?
It's a flexible fund, general operating or capacity building, whatever your needs are. We are interested in looking at the application.
Great. For the Environment Fund, is it one total grant across all 3 areas or one in each area: energy, efficiency, conservation, sustainability?
So it's area or areas. So there's just one grant at this point for this fund. But again, as if you offer an education program in one or all 3 or 2, we will look at that application.
Great. There's a question around site visits. At which stage of the grant application review process do these occur?
Right. So the site visits actually occur once an organization is funded. We have limited, in general, when it's non-COVID times, we have limited capacity in general, but we have promised that we will offer a site visit to anyone that is funded. And again, as I mentioned earlier, even if you're not funded, we are interested in talking with you, and we are happy to give you a feedback call after the process is over.
Great. Okay, can you apply to multiple funds if the organization meets the criteria?
Unfortunately, you can only apply to one fund. So please identify which would be the best fit for you, and please apply to that one fund.
And what type of supporting documents are needed?
So they are listed, they'll be in the application. We basically ask for, as I mentioned, financials and a list of your board of directors, and most of the information that we ask for is just about your program and to tell us about what you do in your organization.
Great. For the data section, looks like there's a question for some clarification on is the data about the organization or the people that we serve? It's
actually both. There are 5 questions, and they ask about the individuals that you serve, and then also about your organization and what type of measurement or evaluation you do within your organization. And if I can mention one thing about this, we have intentionally not created many questions. We created a small section of 5 questions to start gaining an understanding of both who you're serving and who your organization, what type of measurement or data you do collect, but it's very minimal at this point, just to get a better understanding of the landscape and who's collecting data and who's not.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'm making my way through everyone's questions here. Okay, let's see. What is the percentage of grants given for general operating versus program support roughly?
So I do not, I don't have that data actually. And I would say the following, which is that there is no prescribed, this is always a question that's asked, there's no prescribed path forward, meaning that we really look at organizations and we make decisions about which organizations we feel are good investments with limited dollars.
Great. Okay, a question around clarification for the aging grant that is about it being 2 years. Just to confirm that is how that works.
Yes, it is a grant. Yes, it is a grant that will be given over 2 years.
Okay, are there, let's see, are there prohibitions on advocacy related work?
No, they're not. However, I will say this, that I think because of limited dollars, I do think that oftentimes the committees make decisions about providing direct service to organize the funding for direct service. So I just want to kind of put that out there. That's not to say the committee wouldn't decide to fund an organization that's invested in advocacy for their residents in our region. But I'm just saying that historically, the committee has made the decision to fund organizations that are providing direct service.
There's a question around whether we have a sense of how many are typically new grant recipients versus returning grant recipients.
So I would actually say the majority are returning. And every year we learn about more organizations. And I'm hoping that this year, by having some funding for mental health and also, of course, expanding the Environment Fund, we're going to learn about more organizations that are in our region. But typically in the areas of the Community Investment Fund, which we described earlier, the organizations are have applied in the past.
For the Environment Fund, do public schools count as a government entity collaborator?
Yes.
Great. For the Ross Roberts Fund, do funds need to be used within 1 year or over 2 years? And when does the funding period start?
So the checks will go out around April. We think around April 15th. So decisions will be made at the end of March. And the funding, ideally, we'd like it to be used for the year that we're giving the funding for. If there is a situation in which the funding cannot be used, we are willing to have a discussion, and we are generally very understanding. If for whatever reason a program can't happen and need to extend the funding into another year, we could allow that to happen.
Great. If organizations had to dip into reserves in 2020, does this adversely affect the review of the grant application?
I think that we are in an unusual time right now, and I think that the committee members will be looking at all scenarios and trying to understand each of your organizations and the challenges that you've experienced.
Great. There is a question here around winners of the most recent COVID food grant list.
Yes.
I can answer that one. We will be making announcements about the most recent grantees from our Build Back Dream Forward COVID grant cycle later this month. So more information on that there. Are there budget limits for organizations looking to apply?
They're not.
Okay. Once again, a clarification around only applying to one fund.
Yes.
And how can an organization decide what is the best fit?
I think two things. One is taking some time and looking at the priority areas. And then if you are really having a difficult time, please pick up the phone or email Jennifer or myself, and we'd be happy to talk to you and help you decide where the best fit is.
Do you consider multi-year awards or for organizations that have received yearly grants? Is there a gap year?
There is not a gap year at this point. And every year, thank you actually for that question, because every year the committee makes a decision based on the applications that we receive. So there's no, we have no formula for how many times an organization can receive a grant over a certain amount of years and consecutive years. And we look at each year differently from the year before.
If an organization is in the process of building its website and communication tools, is it going to impact its application?
I don't think so. I think you explained that in the application. Again, as I said earlier, many of the reviewers may not be familiar with your organization or may not know, of course, some of the challenges or some of the opportunities that are happening within your organization. And the application is an opportunity for you to talk about that and explain, and the reviewers will review them and make decisions.
Okay. Still working my way through some questions here. A question about a little further discussion about preferences for military funding.
Yes, that there's.
So someone wants us to talk more about the preferences for military funding.
So I think that there's certain the criteria, I think at this point is the same, of course, for all the other organizations, and the focus area is around emergency assistance and workforce development. So if you have a question about whether your organization will fit into the criteria or the focus area, I'm happy to talk to you more about that specifically.
Okay. What if an organization is located in Maryland but serves Northern Virginia constituents?
If you are serving Northern Virginia residents, then you please apply.
Okay. I see a note about someone who had an issue with one link that I sent in a response. And so don't worry about the links right now. We will follow up again in an email with everyone to have the full slide deck, the link to this recording, and all the links on the website to how and where you can apply and find more information. So we'll send that again following today's program. I think there are still some questions around how to determine exact focus area and program versus general operating support. And I think those questions have been addressed, Sari, from your response already. So again, for additional questions on that and making the best decision, do feel free to reach out to Sari and Jennifer with your questions there. Okay, I'm still looking through the list. Okay, this is again a question about, can we apply for a grant in the Monde Fund as well as the Ross Roberts Fund for the Arts?
Right, so for this year, we are actually saying only one application.
And existing grantees are eligible to apply.
100%.
Will this be the only open grant cycle of 2021?
At this point, we're focusing on our spring grant cycle. These are the competitive grant cycles. We will be the most robust grant cycles we'll be running at this point. There will be other, let me quickly just mention, there are other grant opportunities that will be available, not as robust as this one, but they will be listed on our website, including, just so everyone knows, there's a Healthy Kids grant cycle that's focused on schools, and there potentially could be others moving forward. Again, our website will have all that information about, and we will also, and the other thing is, once you're already on this list, this distribution list, and you've registered for this webinar, you will now be included in any communication we put out about other grant opportunities as well.
Can you talk a little more about the new Monde grant? Right,
so the Monde grant actually gave out grants also in the past couple of years. This is just, I think, the second year of a competitive grant process, and it really is to benefit youth and children along the Route 1 corridor and Alexandria, as in Fairfax and Alexandria, as Brandon had mentioned. And we feel very fortunate that we'll be able to give out multiple grants of $20,000. And I'm happy to tell you more about that. But I would also say the following, which we've talked to nonprofits in the past about this, that if you are located in that geographic area, it would be potentially a good fit for you to apply there versus child and youth, just knowing that child and youth development, the general fund, may have many, many applications, and it possibly, depending on numbers, it may not be as competitive. So you can decide for yourself, and we can talk to you a little bit more about that. But in general, because Monde is focused, the geographic area may give an opportunity to certain organizations in a different way.
On the site visit, what happens if you're a virtual organization with no bricks and mortar?
Well, I think at this point, our site visits are all virtual, and they're mostly conversations, not necessarily tours of facilities. So that is fine. I think what we're just interested in is conversations with various nonprofits to learn about you. So that would be fine.
Can a newer organization working with a fiscal sponsor apply? And if yes, do we want board and financial information from the fiscal sponsor, the organization, or both?
Let's have why don't we have it sounds like there's that's very nuanced potentially, and a few questions around that. Why don't we schedule, if you could circle back with me, we'll talk more about that and what we recommend in submitting, how you should submit your application.
With the difficult environment of performing arts, how will concert programming cancellations be handled due to restrictions? And will funding need to be returned if programming is forced to be canceled?
So thank you for asking that question. Similar to what I mentioned earlier around the child and youth funding, we understand that COVID is creating some huge challenges for a variety of organizations and programs. And so I think that people should still apply for programs. I know people are being very creative about how they implement programming, and if you have something planned and you want to apply to support those programs, please apply, and we will work with you.
There are a couple of questions around clarification with mental health and aging, both being within the same application. Is the mental health grant in conjunction with aging? So i.e. in support of older adults, or is it standalone for any mental health group?
Thank you for asking. Yes. Okay. Thank you. So the Aging in Place grant is separate actually from mental health, and mental health is for all different ages. And so they're separate applications actually, but they're within the same fund.
Are the data questions being graded as part of the grants?
No. So thank you for asking that question as well. There is no grading, and we are not measuring data and organizations against one another. This is purely for information to help us do our work better and become more informed.
Okay, some more questions about sharing this information. Again, will all be shared with all of you following this presentation, and you are absolutely welcome to share it with board members or other members on your team who might find it helpful in how you submit your applications. There is another question about how do you receive the code that is requested in the form? I'm not exactly sure what that means. If you have any.
The online, you're asking about the online.
The code that is requested in the form. So it sounds like it might be a specific question around accessing the application. If there's any question on that you're having trouble with in accessing, please feel free to reach out to Sari or Jennifer. Okay.
And again, I'm sorry. And again, the applications will go live at 5 o'clock today. So it may be that the form is not open yet. So by 5 o'clock, all the forms will be available.
Great. If an organization is in its second year of Ross Roberts funding for the arts, can it apply for another 2-year grant?
So if you're in the process of being funded, no.
Okay. If an audit is required and the most recent is from 2019, is that acceptable?
Yes.
Again, it might be behind due to the pandemic.
I was going to say yes, and again, we can discuss specifics around financials that have been impacted by the pandemic offline also. Please feel free to give us a call or email us.
Great. Okay. I feel like I've gotten through the end of this list. There have been a lot of questions coming in today. And so if we did not have time to address your questions during the presentation today, you see the contact information on the screen here from both Sari and Jennifer, and please feel free to reach out. And we will follow up with an email that we send to everyone on the call here later today. Great.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for taking the time to be with us this morning. And we know this is an unusual year also, as some of the questions have brought to light, of course, about funding and just the need for funding. So please know we're here to talk through issues with you, and we look forward to receiving many applications this year and continuing with you to make an impact in our region. So thank you so much for everything, and have a good day, everyone.